Cinephiles, film enthusiasts, and relaxation seekers. My name is Cinephile ASMR, and today we are talking about 2022's Scream. Okay, quick side note, it'll never not be frustrating when a sequel drops the number after the title, because then it just makes it like, that much more complicated when people think you're talking about the original or the new one. It's like, come on, man. Anyway, this newest addition to the Scream franchise takes place 20 years after the events of the original and 10 years after the most recent film, wherein a new face or faces have donned the mask and have begun terrorizing the town of Woodsboro again. And there we meet the group of new people along with familiar faces such as Sydney, Gale, and Dewey. And then we begin to find a connection between the both old and new, and the journey just gets crazier and crazier from there. I have been a massive fan of the Scream franchise for years. Every film has seemed to be just a step ahead of the rest of the iconic horror franchises and figures out there. They've had their pulse on pop culture and managed to stay relevant and tell poignant stories that are scary and are filled with the slasher tropes that make it so well known, while also commentating on sequels, franchises, and so forth. And it's managed to stay fresh for so many years, for 5 entries. Luckily, Scream and Ghostface, being one of the most well-known and distinguishable figures in the horror landscape, has not succumbed to the weight of pointless sequels such as the Saw franchise, the Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th films, where a lot of them are just there, filled with no substance, as many would call a fast food film, where you enjoy it or you can ingest it on watch, but it leaves no lasting effect on you. But the Scream films have managed to be the complete opposite of that. And this sense of awareness and originality beautifully translates to this film. And like I did say, there is the balance between new and old characters. Unlike the fourth film, though, where I think it's more split down the middle between the both of them, this is a film heavily consistent upon these new batch of teenage characters as you get used to them, how they are involved within Ghostface, and how that mystery begins to unravel. You begin to really fall in love with these characters while also seeing what the old ones have to offer to the table as well. With something that I found to be utterly terrific this time around is with these new batch of characters, as this is the 5th film in the franchise, each of these characters begin to question each other, and they have this banter and discourse where they might think this person's the killer or this person's the killer, and they point fingers at one another in a way that manages to keep the film fresh while also having a comedic edge to itself, and lends itself to really opening the door for the audience to fall in love with them. This isn't a 50-50 split, more so I would say a 70-30, where the new characters get to take the reins, and that could have failed on its face if the writing wasn't there to serve them well. And surprisingly, Scream 5 might not only just be the goriest Scream film, but I would argue it's one of the most emotional as you follow the main Carpenter sisters, and why one is more separated and distanced from not only her but the whole town of Woodsboro. You can see why, and as that unraveled, you get beautiful performances from the both of them. And realistically, I think every actor is great in this. From, you have Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette returning for a 5th time with these new batch of characters, and they all commingle into this melting pot of just terrific acting, and it really serves the story well overall. There's so many twists and turns that you begin to discover as the movie progresses, but I really can't stress enough just how well balanced it is, from some light, airy humor to some very emotional moments with these new characters and the returning ones, along with the slasher horror that Scream has been known for. But these characters I loved, and it's one of the biggest things that these films tend to forget and just oversee, as these characters are just body counts for horror. A lot of people tend to forget that you can actually write some decent characters if you put the attention to it. And not only that, they talk about I mean, if you think about it, the first one was referencing and citing horror classics, and as such made Scream a classic in and of itself. And then you have the sequel, Scream 2, which really was a big awareness pot of sequels, their purposes, and whether the first or the second is better and why they exist in the first place. And then you have the third one, which is arguably the weakest, but even that movie had a lot to say. In my opinion, it dealt with trauma, grief, and surprisingly, it talked about misogyny and the blatant sexism in Hollywood in order to get what you want, especially if you are a female, which is actually kind of mind-blowing considering it's under the same production company that finances these films that was run by the Weinsteins. Oh, that's just an insane thing that I don't even want to think about. Then you have Scream 4, which was made many years after, which definitely delved into this idea of franchises and original IP being milked of all of its originality and substance into just money machines. This all leads to Scream 5. Where could they have gone with this? What could they have really commentated on and elaborated more about with our current pop culture landscape? Well, with this, it is all about rebooting franchises, but more so, and honestly, the most surprisingly, is how toxic fandoms really are some of the most scummy people around, how they gatekeep, how if something doesn't turn out the way they want to, they honestly just feel so wrong themselves personally, and it was so perfect, so perfect. I saw many of these characters discussing this, and I thought about all the experiences that I've had being completely blasted for loving like The Last Jedi or movies that are very, very controversial within their fan bases, and this movie highlights that to a T, and it just adds a whole other layer of appreciation for this movie. And like I said, this is a Scream film, and the gore is there to boot. It goes full send, no withdrawal, and paired with such great sound design, it felt like my bones, my blood was being oozed out as Ghostface just stabs you, and it was crazy. With that as well comes the emotion. You do have these new cast of characters, and I will say, movie's not perfect, and my one glaring issue is a spoiler, so I'll talk about it after I give my letter grade, but one of the best things about this was its connective tissue towards the first few films, which does it beg the question, do you have to watch the other 4 films in order to appreciate this? Gun to my head answer, yes. However, I would really say you only have to watch the first and maybe the 4th film, but if you're gonna do that, I would just say watch them all because they're a load of fun, because then you'd be able to really fully understand and appreciate the emotional resonance with it all. Because this is a returning film, it is a sequel, it isn't a reboot, although there is not the number at the end of the title in this. I think you would really enjoy and appreciate it all, especially with the returning characters coming back. Their chemistry is built off of those 4 films, so if you didn't, I think you'd be missing out a lot. And like I said, there is issues with that sort of connection being made, and I think a lot of people, it will like sort of differentiate and split down the middle, a lot of people, but I really appreciate it. I mean, you've had sequels in this franchise where Ghostface at the very end reveals to be Sydney's brother. It's crazy, it's absurd. So it's through and through a Scream film. I love it, and I think a lot of people with these films being made years, decades after the sequels before it or the original put it on such a high pedestal. And at the end of the day, this is a Scream film. It isn't going to be this philosophical, contemporary work of art questioning an allegory of life. It is a person or persons in a Ghostface mask hacking people up in a town called Woodsboro. What else could you ask for? And on top of that, it is clean, it is well directed, it is a filmmaking paradise in terms of slashers, and if you like horror films, you have to check this out. I had a total blast. I thought it was so much fun, and what it did most and utterly surprised me by was bringing in these new characters, giving them the limelight, and in doing so, I loved them. It's not something that is going to have such huge ripples on the franchise, or really going to make you think, oh man, these are some of the best characters ever written, but they're really well done considering the genre that has treated characters as body counts so unfairly, so lackluster and surface level. It was really refreshing. That also paired with returning cast and such a strong pulse on our current pop culture landscape. I love this movie. It was a load of fun. I do have one glaring issue with it, but with all that being said, I really want to give this movie a strong, certified B+. It really was a terrific hack job slashing blast that was gory, grotesque, emotional, and laughable at times, and in a good way, not at the film, but with the film. It's very well written, and I was worried because the original writer did not return for this film, but that's totally fine. This movie is great. It has lasting legs, and I can't wait to see where this franchise goes. So with that being said, let me get my one spoiler with this. If you haven't seen the movie, go check it out. Let me know what you thought, and come back to the video so we can discuss, because I'm going to ask you a question. So we follow Samantha Carpenter, the sister who left Woodsboro and her sister and just escaped that life. And as the movie progresses, we find that she is the daughter of Billy Loomis, and as such, she sees visions of him, and she reacts naturally. She's freaked out, she's upset, she's angry to be related to a killer. And for a long time, I was there with it. I made sense. It was a nice connection and tie-in to the universe, and it justified its existence. However, towards the very end, at the final showdown, there's a mirror shot of Billy Loomis as he directs her to a knife on the floor, and she looks at the mirror in the reflection of him, and then she goes to the knife. And at first I thought that was really weird. I did not know, I get she saw the knife in her head, but why? And then furthermore, there's a part right after that where it's her and her father's reflection on some piece of glass, and she just seems unfazed by it. To me, was that the film trying to say, oh, she's been able to move past that and progress as a person to being a better individual? But if so, I feel like they did such a haphazard job with it, because it was he's a killer, and I'm not trying to say his presence helped her, but the fact that he directed her to the knife, and it was trying to show that he was helping her, but it was blatantly obvious that he was a killer. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The movie, the first one, wasn't trying to paint him in any other light. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and as a result, that was the really only thing that I left feeling a bit iffy on. But seriously, aside from that, I had a boatload of fun. I hope you did too. And remember, everybody, I love you so much. Stay tuned for some videos coming down the line, and remember to take life one frame at a time.